Let's talk about your First Amendment right to make knowingly false statements of fact, also known as your right to tell lies. So this is one that's complicated. I mean, we've got defamation, we've got libel, we've got slander, but then we've got just generally saying false stuff. And for that, we're going to talk about the case of U.S. versus Alvarez from the Supreme Court from 2012. So this was a case that involved the 2005 Stolen Valor Act. And the act criminalized basically committing stolen valor, saying that you won an award for your service when you did not, the Medal of Honor in this case. So what happened was a man named Xavier Alvarez, who was a well-known liar, and you will see that from the court opinion that Justice Kennedy writes, went to a public meeting in 2007, and he said, quote, "I'm a retired Marine of 25 years. I retired in the year 2001. Back in 1987, I was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. I got wounded many times by the same guy." So he introduced himself that way. This was not an attempt to get some employment benefits or to defraud anyone or anything. It was just an attempt to win himself over some respect. And he was indicted under the Stolen Valor Act for saying this. So this makes its way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. He's being prosecuted, and we have our 9 justices here to hear the case. And it ends up being a plurality opinion, meaning that there's not really that much breaking new law because the justices, they couldn't get 5 justices to all agree on the law. So Justice Kennedy writes the plurality opinion. He's joined by Chief Justice Roberts, Justice Ginsburg, and Justice Sotomayor. And he writes basically that we can't just criminalize speech like this. Speech that's just purely based on the content, it needs to be subject to strict scrutiny. So the meaning of that is that content-based regulations, those regulations of speech which target just the message, the communicative impact of the speech, need to be subject to strict scrutiny. And this is the highest standard that there is. And basically, in order to meet that, the government, so the prosecution in this case, needs to show, first, that it was narrowly tailored, and second, narrowly tailored to achieving a compelling government interest. And so the interest that the government has here, that they're trying to advance, is the interest of not diluting the Congressional Medal of Honor, making sure that people respect it, because they don't want a group of clowns going around saying, "I won the Medal of Honor, I won the Medal of Honor, I won the Medal of Honor," and just spreading lies in order to make themselves look good. Because, yeah, it's offensive to people who actually won the Congressional Medal of Honor. It's diluting the value. It's not given to just anyone. It's a very, very high honor. So Justice Kennedy says, look, the public outcry at the idea of Alvarez saying this, the backlash that he would get, is vindicating the harm that actual winners of the Congressional Medal of Honor suffer as a result of hearing his lie. And the same can be said of the government's interest. The government's interest can be satisfied by means other than this criminalization of speech. He also pointed out, as to the content-based nature of the speech, it applies in just about any scenario. You can scream it from a rooftop, you could whisper it into someone's ear, barely audible. So there are a lot of problems with this law in the plurality's opinion. And we get a concurrence. So this is what gives the majority their majority, even though it's not a majority, but they help find that the act is unconstitutional. We have 2 other justices, Justice Stephen Breyer and Justice Elena Kagan, writing a concurrence. So that means 6 justices saying that the act is unconstitutional under the First Amendment. So Breyer writes, well, look, I agree that it's unconstitutional. I think it should be actually subject to intermediate scrutiny. So this is not like some act that's restricting speech about philosophy, about social sciences, about history, about science generally. So those are like the things that are off limits, and restrictions of those types of speech, it's subject to strict scrutiny. You can't just restrict speech on those types of things. So, if someone says, George Washington was our 3rd president, you can't criminalize that. That's just a false statement about history. There's nothing wrong with that. Or, Barack Obama is a Republican. That's a false statement of history or politics. It's not true, but you can't criminalize that. Science, you have the right to say climate change is not happening. You have the right to say that solids, liquids, and gases are not three elements. There's more to it than that. You have the right to say almost anything on those things, basically, because strict scrutiny is going to apply to any restrictions on that. So the government's going to need to come with a really compelling reason for restricting that speech, and it needs to be narrowly tailored to that restriction. But there's less danger when you're restricting statements about fact that are easily verifiably false. We can easily verify that Xavier Alvarez did not win the Congressional Medal of Honor. So it should be subject to intermediate scrutiny, this law. So that's their opinion, but they still agree this thing is unconstitutional. There are much more ways that the Congress could have handled this type of thing. They could have pursued that interest in other ways, and they go on to list some. It's not super relevant to the law here, but you know, the fact is that they found it. I'm not going to list all of them, but and then of course the dissent says, the dissent is the conservative justices, some of them, Alito, Thomas, and Scalia, who say, well, look, Congress recognized that the Congressional Medal of Honor is a really important thing. They have a worthy goal here, and really, should blatant lies be constitutionally protected? And they say, no, not really. Look, some lies have value, like, hey, lying to protect innocent victims. But just lying generally, no. So they say that it should be constitutional, that it's something that the people voted for their members of Congress, and the members of Congress voted on this act. So essentially they should respect democracy. But yeah, that is what the dissent says. What we get from this case is that it's unconstitutional, regardless of whether it's subject to strict scrutiny or intermediate scrutiny. But yeah, this was a big case, a good case on free speech as well, pretty interesting. And the Stolen Valor Act ended up actually getting amended to only target fraud. So you can't lie about winning the Congressional Medal of Honor to defraud someone or something. And of course, that is constitutionally sound, because fraudulent speech is not free speech. So yeah, that is your First Amendment lecture on lying and false statement of facts for today. Let me know what you think in the comments. As always, if you found this video interesting, helpful, or insightful, please leave a like, comment, or subscribe to the channel. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to speaking to you in the next video.